Welcome to The Self-Made Theory, the podcast that's all about innovating, overcoming, and prospering. We interview founders, entrepreneurs, innovators, CEOs, and other exciting people about their amazing business journey. Over to your host, Ben Campbell, for this week's episode.
On today's episode of The Self-Made Theory, I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Sam Costello, who's the co-founder of BiomeBank. It's effectively a poo bank to treat various diseases, and I promise it's not a gross story. It's actually pretty amazing. Dr. Costello undertook his PhD on fecal microbiota transplant, FMT, which is the process of transferring fecal bacteria and other microbes from a healthy individual into another individual as a treatment for ulcerative colitis. He's been an invited speaker at Australian and international conferences, has numerous peer-reviewed publications focusing on the gut microbiome and FMT, and he implemented his specialist knowledge to co-found BiomeBank, Australia's first commercial public stool bank. You will learn about the incredible medical benefits of FMT and the importance of having a healthy microbiome and how Dr. Costello came to found his business, BiomeBank. My name is Ben Campbell, and this is The Self-Made Theory. Dr. Sam Costello, welcome to The Self-Made Theory.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
We're here in your facility. What's the right term for it?
Well, stool bank or laboratory, I suppose.
There's a lab and there's an office and there's a place where you freeze stuff.
Yeah. There's a toilet.
There is a toilet. We'll have to have a look at that later. That's the only place I haven't seen yet. Your special installed toilet.
Yeah. It's it's the place where the magic happens.
We actually better start with your elevator pitch so people actually understand what BiomeBank is all about.
Yeah. Okay. So BiomeBank is a stool bank and microbial therapeutics company, and our mission is to really replace the missing microbes that are leading to disease, and we aim to do that worldwide scale.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about what a fecal transplant actually is.
Yeah, so fecal microbiota transplantation, or FMT, involves really collecting stool from a healthy person and putting it into the gut of a person with disease with the aim of treating the disease. It's really quite a simple process in that respect. The fecal transplant has been around really for a long time, so thousands of years.
Really?
Yeah, so it's a process that there's records from China from back as far as the 3rd and 4th century of people using what they called yellow soup.
Yeah, okay.
And they would collect stool and give it to people with dysentery.
Right.
And reported there were benefits there. And there are a number of cultures around the world that have also, that don't have written traditions, but have used essentially fecal transplant in different forms to treat gut conditions. So one of the most famous cases was a Bedouin in North Africa. And there's a great report from World War I where German soldiers in the area were struck down with a large outbreak of dysentery, and they took on the local Bedouin practice of actually collecting camel feces and ingesting that to treat their dysentery. And there's reports in the German medical literature of
it actually working.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually in the animal kingdom. This is really quite common. You would have seen probably dogs doing this, eating feces of other dogs, and a lot of other animals do this to try and, we think, to replace bacteria into their gut that perform important functions for them. So what we're doing is not is something that's happens in the natural world, has been done for many years, but really only in Western medicine on a large scale in the last 10 years or so.
So now that we've turned everybody off.
Those remaining listeners, yeah.
Actually, I might have to, in my introduction, record a don't listen to this at breakfast.
Yeah, we tune out between minutes.
Only for consumption between 10 and 12 each day.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know what the microbiome is, can you explain what it makes up?
Yes. So the microbiome is the genes of all the organisms that live on and within us.
So on as being outside on your skin?
Yeah, that's right. The gut microbiota is the organisms that live in your gut.
Yeah.
And that includes bacteria, viruses, fungi, archaea, and other organisms.
So this is good bacteria and bad bacteria
that
we're talking about, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one bacteria might be good in one context and bad in another.
Okay.
The exact same bacteria, and it depends where it is and other circumstances. So
what influences the microbiome and the microbiota?
Yeah, so a large number of things. We know that diet is a big one. So most of these organisms in our gut need fibre. That's their main food source.
Right.
And a lot of modern processed food doesn't have fibre, or a lot of it's ripped out. And so the old fruit and veg naturally are partially digested, and a lot of that roughage gets through to the large bowel, and that's what the bacteria feed off.
Right.
Whereas in more processed, refined food, a lot of it's absorbed up in the top of the gut, and that's partly why it leads to often weight gain and obesity, because the whole thing gets absorbed.
Right.
But also there's very little that gets to the lower gut and feeds the good bacteria. And so that's critical. Antibiotic exposure is a big one. So for obvious reasons, they're designed to kill bacteria, antibiotics. Life-saving, and really have changed human history by alleviating a lot of disease. And so, they've been amazing. But there has been a cost of antibiotic exposure, and that is the loss of organisms within the gut. And we talked about C. difficile infection. That's of the potential side effect of killing off gut bacteria. But there are other things. There are other problems from that. So we know that antibiotics in animal models are associated with weight gain and obesity. And in fact, antibiotics have commonly been used as growth promoters in the food industry.
They have, yeah.
And so, particularly to young animals, so antibiotic exposure in early life, we think is a particular problem and could lead to a number of issues down the line.
So really effectively what you're saying is because we're consuming the meat that comes from those animals, is that our problem? Is that part of the problem?
Exactly. So yes, so antibiotic exposure in food is an issue, but also prescribed antibiotics.
Yeah.
So that's another problem. There is also less opportunity to transmit organisms from a person to another person. So
particularly at the moment.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I imagine, we're all lathered up with with hand sanitizer.
Absolutely, yeah. So that will reduce the risk of transmitting a disease, so a pathogen or a bad organism.
Which is good.
But it also reduces the opportunity to transmit good organisms. So the organisms that get into your gut don't magically get there. You have to essentially swallow them. Yeah. And you swallow a lot of them during birth, during delivery.
I was reading that.
Yeah.
I was reading some stuff about the difference between caesarean section and vaginal delivery.
Yeah, so there are different exposures there. And then early in life through breast milk is another way that a baby will often pick up a lot of organisms, so from the mother. And just interacting in the early childhood environment with the environment. So other household members, pets, all sorts of things. And
playing outside.
Absolutely. You see young children put things in their mouth instinctively. I think that's probably not a coincidence. And we know that early acquisition of the organisms is critically important. Yeah. So a lot of the things that ordinarily would have happened, hundreds of years ago, don't happen so frequently now. And so if you put all that together, then in modern life, we can end up with a depleted gut microbiome. Yeah. And our mission at BiomeBank is to replenish those missing microbes.
Yeah.
So
why can't I just get that through diet? So let's just say I'm typical, not eating particularly well, and then decide I'm going to go and eat plants like there's no tomorrow.
Yep.
Will that solve my issues potentially?
It would help.
Yeah.
It would absolutely help because you'll get blooming of better bacteria, I suppose, so to speak. and it will change the composition of your gut microbiome.
Yep.
And generally,
But if I've got an underlying condition that's going to be solved by fecal transplant, then I'm not just going to solve that necessarily with diet, because I'm not getting the bacteria back.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you can only do so much, because you can change the relative abundance of what you got, but you can't add really additional bacteria that easily by that mechanism.
Yeah.
So we think you need to probably replace missing organisms and often improve your diet so that those organisms can take up. And
so this is not a magic pill, right? This is not, hey, I've eaten terribly for all my life. I've now got a whole bunch of issues with my gut. I come to you guys, get a quick quick fix, and then I'm off on my way and I'm fine for the next 30 years.
No. And at the moment, we're supplying just for patients with C. difficile infection. And in the future, there will be more and more indications, we think. And we're supplying for clinical trials for new indications at present. And then looking from those clinical trials to develop defined therapies. So distill down what are the important bugs within the fecal transplant that are doing the job, and then packaging those up and selling those.
Yeah. So let's talk about the medical benefits of why this is a treatment that makes sense for people.
Yeah. So the main indication at present is to treat a condition called C. difficile infection, and this is a bug that overgrows the gut when your native gut bacteria are diminished. So typically after antibiotic exposure, and this infection can cause severe symptoms, so diarrhea, fever, abdominal pain, and can land people in hospital, intensive care even. And there are a large number of people that die worldwide from this condition every year.
Wow.
And one of the problems with it is that the organism itself will often respond to an antibiotic, but the antibiotic causes the collateral damage to your native gut bacteria, which then just leaves this sort of ecological space that the bug will then re-emerge into.
Right.
So the C. difficile infection, the bug forms a spore, which is quite hardy. And so it's in that way, and in some cases, the antibiotics just don't work. And so for these people who have the recurrent Clostridium difficile infection, the cures with the standard treatments are around 30%, so antibiotic therapies, whereas fecal transplant will result in cure in upwards of 90%. So it's really revolutionised the treatment of this condition.
A massive uplift in
huge,
rate, isn't it?
Yeah, so you just don't see, we call it a delta, so the difference between one treatment and the other or an improvement of say 60%. And it's very rare to find therapies that have that level of improvement. It's usually far more incremental change. So it has revolutionised this condition. This is a relatively common infection in hospitals, but on a worldwide basis, comparing it to more common diseases like, obesity, high blood pressure, it's much less common. But it's demonstrated, it's a proof of concept that by radically changing the gut microbiome, you can treat a disease, cure a disease, and save a life. And so that concept is now being applied to a number of other diseases. And there's promising results in other conditions, but not as well substantiated as for C. diff.
Yeah. There's lots of conversation, or a lot more conversation about the microbiome in health circles than there's ever been before.
That's right.
Why is that? Are we learning more about it?
Yeah, I think so. I think we know more, and it seems there is some level of fascination that a lot of people hold around the gut microbiome, and people really are interested. So scientists, but also the general public. One of the reasons that the knowledge in the area has really expanded and exploded really in the last 10 or 15 years is because of new techniques with sequencing. So being able to work out the genetic code of the bacteria in the gut. And there are now, we call it metagenomic sequencing. The cost of that has plummeted. So exponential drop in cost, similar to, computer chips and these other technologies that just rapidly drop in cost and allow, mobile phones to proliferate, or, uptake of solar panels to just skyrocket. And the same has happened with microbial sequencing, and it's allowed, labs all around the world in areas with research teams that don't have big budgets to be able to do this complex sequencing and look at health and look at various diseases. And if you look at the curve of research output, it's just exploded with that cost drop-off. And so every week there's new papers, new understandings because of that. Yeah, so essentially the dramatic drop in cost has allowed us to use this sequencing and gain a greater understanding.
So can you give our listeners a bit more insight into what the sequencing actually does?
Yeah, so it's essentially a process where the DNA from the bacteria is extracted in the laboratory, and then it is fragmented and put through a sequencing machine, which will tell you the base pairs of what the code is. And then the computer algorithms are used to join those bits of code back together, and also then to infer that code equals a bacteria. And there are reference libraries of genomes of bacteria that you can compare to. And so when you've got your sample, you get the whole genetic code, and then you're comparing it to a library of reference genomes where you would then be able to pick out what bacteria you have in the sample, and also computationally, so using other computer algorithms, you can piece them together even for bacteria where you haven't grown them or identified them in that way before. And yeah, that gives you a picture of what's in there.
Mm. So before you started BiomeBank, you're a gastroenterologist?
Yeah, that's right.
So how did BiomeBank come about?
Yeah, so I was in training. I just finished my gastroenterology training. I had an idea to do a trial in a fecal transplant in ulcerative colitis, which is a condition which affects the lower bowel, the colon, and results in inflammation of the bowel and bloody diarrhea, abdominal pain, and is quite common. So affects up to 1 in 300 Australians.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And
it's pretty uncomfortable, isn't it?
That's right.
It can be pretty debilitating.
Exactly. Mm. And it's a condition where we don't really have any therapies that are curative. So we have quite a number of therapies now, and many of them work reasonably well, but there's still a lot of patients who don't get relief from their symptoms adequately, and a fair percentage still go on to have their bowel removed because we can't get the inflammation under control. So there's a clear need for new therapies. And most of the therapies at present also act via suppressing the immune system. And we know that in ulcerative colitis, there is a problem with the gut bacteria. So the gut bacteria are quite different to healthy.
Right.
And we think that the gut bacteria are involved in the disease process. There's a lot of hints to that. And so changing it made sense. And so we ran a trial as a sort of PhD project, and we showed that you could induce remission in this disease. And
what was the trial?
So fecal transplant in ulcerative colitis. So we had 73 patients mainly in Adelaide and some patients in Perth. And half of them were given fecal transplant and half were given essentially their own poo back.
Yeah, just as a sort of double-blind study type.
Exactly, yeah.
scenario.
And then we could see a difference. And we could see that the people who got the fecal transplant did better. So, so like roughly a third of patients went into remission versus 9% in the placebo group. But to deliver that study, I had to have a reliable source of donors.
Yeah.
And so I'd collect the stool and freeze it and put it in the freezer at the research lab. But because I was working in the hospital, I would hear about these patients with the C. diff infection, and I knew that we could treat them with this stool. So we started doing that, and then it became available really throughout the state from that stool bank. But it was being funded by the PhD. And so once that finished, we had to either shut down the service or create a new stool bank. So that's how BiomeBank came about. It wasn't really as if I didn't start with the idea of forming a stool bank. It was just a necessary thing to do the trial. And then once it got set up, it became indispensable, really, because to shut it down would have denied patients treatment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a fairly typical entrepreneurial process.
Yeah.
Problem, solution.
Yes. And then this thing has come out of it that, I didn't necessarily intend to build. Yeah.
So let's talk about where you get your donors from. How does that process work?
So we have people contact us, and
why do they contact you? Is it just because it's interesting, or they want to help people?
Well, we've had some. I suppose we've had initially we would advertise. Right. We'd put some flyers up around the university or places like that. But more recently, we've had like a little bit of media around the stool bank, and people have jumped on our website, and then there's a portal on there that they can register as a donor.
Yep.
And then we would send out essentially a questionnaire, where they would tick box questionnaire, and if people passed that and they seemed to be healthy, they would come in and have a medical interview.
Yep.
So I often do the interviews. We have a infectious diseases physician who's our head of donor screening, Emily, and she often does the interviews, and then a medical examination. And if someone's healthy on those two things, then they would proceed to have a blood and a stool test.
Yep.
And if they pass those two as well, then they enter the donor program. And someone would usually donate from, say, 8 to 12 weeks period, and then have another another screening test.
Yeah.
And if they've passed both of those, then all of the stool that was collected and frozen, it can be released for use in hospitals.
Okay. And then, so it comes into the lab.
Yeah.
So they donate actually here at the lab, don't they?
They do, yeah. Yeah. So we have a toilet on site.
And it's a special built toilet just for you guys.
That's right. Yeah. We had to have it installed. When I first started doing this, I would give people, the volunteers, a bag, and they would take it home and bring it in a little esky. Yeah. And then I would take it into the laboratory, which was a research laboratory, and mix it up myself. But there are a number of potential things that could go wrong with that process. Thankfully, nothing really did go wrong in that process. And it really worked well and treated a lot of patients that got good outcomes. But we want to be more rigorous and need to be more rigorous, because we'll be regulated by the Therapeutics Goods Administration. So we have to have total control over the process, including the donation process. So we have to watch someone go into the room and then come out with their stool.
And then it goes straight into the lab, and you start working with that almost immediately.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So we don't want it, we want it as fresh as possible, straight into an anaerobic chamber. So we had a look at those earlier.
We did, yeah. I'm going to pop some photos, I think, up on our website for people to have a look at.
Yeah. So they're essentially a Perspex box that we pump full of nitrogen, hydrogen, CO2. And so there's no oxygen in there. And a lot of the gut bacteria can't survive in an oxygen-rich environment. So by processing the stool in there, we hope to keep more of the organisms alive.
Yeah.
And then once the product has been processed, we essentially mix the stool with saline or salt water and glycerol, a little bit of sugar, and then freeze the stool. And that glycerol helps keep the bacteria alive during the freezing process.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so then that's in the bank.
That's right.
Ready to be used at some point in the future for someone who's suffering from C. diff or something else.
That's right. Yeah. So it's frozen down, and then, as I said, once we've completed the screening process, then it can be shipped out to hospitals.
And so, who are your customers typically? So, are you being contacted by other gastroenterologists around the country, or clients themselves, or
So mainly, we ship to hospitals and doctors and have it administered, and then it's the responsibility of typically a gastroenterologist to administer the stool product. We function at the moment more like a pharmaceutical company in that respect. We provide to the doctor, and then the doctor decides whether to administer the drug or the FMT to the patient.
Yeah.
Our customers, so we supply hospitals in South Australia and Westmead Hospital in Sydney, and also we've shipped recently to Victoria, and we're looking to expand. So we think there's a real need in Australia for this, and we want to increase access for patients. and then potentially look at overseas as well. So
you're the first stool bank in Australia?
we're the first
commercial
publicly available stool bank.
Yeah.
So there have been stool banks that have provided FMT like internally within a hospital or a clinic.
Yeah, okay.
But we're the first to be set up for distribution. Sure. So essentially to allow widespread access
across the country.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so how do you make money?
Well,
so who's paying? Is the client paying? Is it a part of the government funding program for medicines? Or how does it work?
Yeah. So this is an issue at the moment, is that we don't have. So it's not rebated on either the Medicare schedule or private health insurance, and so hospitals themselves are covering the cost at present. By treating a patient, it avoids hospital admissions, it avoids intensive care and surgeries, and this is cost saving. So we've demonstrated that a product not only saves lives but saves money, and so hospitals have taken it up for that reason. But it's still a lot harder than if you've got it refunded by Medicare.
Yeah.
So,
are you lobbying government for that to happen?
Yeah. So we've approached really like hospital administrators, and we're working to get our product BiomeBoost, we call it, onto the Register of Therapeutic Goods, the ARTG. And once it's on there, then we can essentially look at getting reimbursement schemes put in place.
Yeah. Okay.
But yes, it's a difficult process for a small startup, because most companies that are doing this are huge multinational pharmaceutical companies with massive resources and teams dedicated to dealing with government. So yeah, it's difficult enough building the lab and actually providing the product, but doing those things in addition is tricky. But we know there's a need, and yeah, we hope that we'll be able to get that done.
If you're a founder of a business, a CEO or a senior manager, it's easy to think that you need to work out all of your business and leadership challenges yourself. But just because the buck stops with you doesn't mean you will have all the answers, and it can be pretty lonely at the top. Great leaders will have an executive coach in their corner whose role is to challenge you, guide you, and support you in a non-biased way that friends and colleagues just can't. Contact us at The Self-Made Theory and let us show you how qualified executive coaching and mentoring can help you innovate, overcome, and prosper. So when you decided to start BiomeBank and you knew that was a direction you wanted to take, how did you do that if you're working sort of full-time as a gastroenterologist?
Yeah, so I never went to full-time work, essentially, like clinical work. So because I was keeping the stool bank going, I always allocated time to that. And so I had to make a decision last year. I stopped working in private practice. I still work at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but I spend a lot more time now in BiomeBank, and next year I expect that I'll be doing even more work, more time in BiomeBank, so probably the majority of my time.
That's a pretty big investment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an investment in cash, but it really is, because you're not running a practice and earning money there.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's big opportunity cost financially.
Yeah.
But I think, and I've thought a lot about this and really,
as every founder does.
Yeah, because I have a family and a mortgage, and so there's a practical reality. But I suppose I'm so passionate about this, and I think I have one opportunity. It wasn't really that I set out to form a stool bank, but that opportunity happened, and I just know that I'm probably not going to get another opportunity like this. So I'm going to give it basically everything I can for the next few years, and see how we go. And I'm just really lucky that my wife works and can help, and that really helps me. Emily also does some work at BiomeBank, and that helps as well.
Yeah, and so you got a bit of a team now, haven't you?
Yeah, so Emily's actually an infectious diseases physician.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, so she does the donor screening and all those protocols for us, and those expertise are just been critical, really. So, but also Em has another job, and so that's meant that we can balance things.
Yeah. And how many other people have you got on the team?
So we have 5 employees, and a 6th person starting next week, actually. Or no, 2 weeks' time.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So we've been able to grow, and
so you haven't just funded this through sweat and tears, right? You've had some external funding as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have revenue from the sale of product, and all of that goes into research and development. And then because our aim is to develop these defined microbial therapies, we believe they'll have significant value because they'll be scalable worldwide.
So your intent here is to obviously continue with the collection of samples and using those to treat people.
Yep.
But long term is to work out a way to take the good bacteria out of that and package that into a product effectively.
Yeah, that's right. And we were we were very fortunate to get investment as well early on. So the Hospital Research Foundation backed BiomeBank.
Wow.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time looking for financial support for BiomeBank. Or at that time, it was just a stool bank that was delivering stool to hospitals, and approached Paul Flynn at the Hospital Research Foundation, and really he suggested forming a company that could then transact with the hospitals. And so that was really how we set up. And so they've provided the seed funding and shareholders in BiomeBank.
Yeah.
And more recently, we've been able to raise a second round of funding, and that'll give us a really good runway, really, for the next 18 months to go towards a Series A round. And at that point in time, we think we'll have enough significant assets where I think investors will see real value that we have a clear path towards these defined microbial therapies.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So far along the way, what surprised you the most about setting up your own company?
I think how much I've enjoyed the learning new things about business and that side of things, the operational side of things, because I had medical training, and so I knew very little about business, the startup world, and so I've been really surprised how much I've enjoyed that side of it. I wouldn't say I've been surprised that it's been a lot of work, because I think everyone would realise that it's going to be a lot of work. So, but yeah, that's what I've really loved, that side of it, actually.
So how long has it been now?
First started a stool bank in 2013, but BiomeBank itself was incorporated in December 2018.
Yeah, so coming up to nearly 2 years.
Yes. We moved into this facility at Tech NSA in September last year.
Yeah.
So that's really just 1 year ago. And that's where we've built a clean room and a lab that'll be assessed by the TGA soon. So it's a full independent facility to process stool product. Has really only been here for a year.
If you had your time over again, what would you do differently?
I think I would have started the process a bit earlier, probably. Yeah. So there was a fair wilderness period where I had basically no funding and the need for the stool to be delivered to the hospitals, and I was trying to do my day job, and I had no resources to do it. And so there was a real period there. It was really quite stressful trying to maintain the service without funding. And yeah, I mean, if I knew what I knew now, I could have pitched differently to people. And it wasn't even my idea to form the company. So that's how ignorant I was of the whole process. But once we did form it, I was quite fascinated by it and started reading and listening to things like podcasts and to try and learn how to set up and run a company. But yeah, if I had that knowledge, and I think podcasts like this are fantastic for that, because I think a lot of people just don't realize you can form your own company. You can actually just go out and do it. And I was absolutely ignorant of that. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So if someone come along with a big truckload of cash and said, here it is, go your hardest, what would you do? What would you do from this point forward?
We would turbocharge our microbial culture collection. So this is the collection of organisms, individual bacteria that can then be used to create defined therapies. And we would run a number of large randomized controlled trials of fecal transplant in different conditions to identify the candidate organisms that will give treatments and cures to these diseases.
Now, you're already doing that today, aren't you?
We are, yeah.
Right? So this is just, you would just turbocharge that and just do lots and lots and lots more than
That's right, yeah. And we're constrained by the resources, and obviously with scale, there are a number of other advantages that would come, and we'd be able to get therapies out more quickly.
Yeah.
And so, we have enough at the moment to do what we need to do. But I think to get a therapy to market is hugely expensive. It costs upward of $1 billion in many cases.
Yeah.
And so we're acutely aware that we can't do that all by ourselves with our own resource. And so it will take having defined therapies and then working with partners such as other pharmaceutical companies to really progress through, and investors, of course, to progress through phase 2 and 3 trials and get things into the clinic so that patients can benefit.
Yeah. So if we have listeners who are suffering with C. diff or something else, or people who are interested in donations, how do they find you?
Yeah, so we have a website, and there's a donor portal on there for people who want to donate. Donors have to be from South Australia because we essentially need people to donate on site regularly. And people with C. diff can contact us, and we can then look to put them in touch with a local doctor, and we can arrange delivery of the stool product to treat them. People with other conditions, we're trying to set up clinical trials. We have had one clinical trial in ulcerative colitis, and we're looking at establishing other clinical trials in other areas. And so, I can't really talk about any specific clinical trials until we have them set up.
Yeah, but if they're registered on your website, then they'll get information to know that those are coming up.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, absolutely. We'll put all that detail on the website. Yeah. We really want to facilitate clinical trials around Australia. So with partners, if doctors or clinicians in other hospitals are interested in doing trials, then we would like to support that as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Dr. Sam Costello, thank you very much for sharing your story with the Self-Made Theory.
Thanks, Ben.
Cheers.
It was great.
Whether you're a listener from South Australia who wants to get involved in this research, or you're a person who wants to learn more about the health benefits of having a healthy microbiome, then visit our website, www.theselfmadetheory.com, to find out more. Until next time, keep innovating, overcoming, and prospering.